Okay, hello. Right, welcome to another video. So, the aorta. Okay, here is the abdomen and proximal pelvis, just demonstrating the aorta as a brief overview. So, we've got the IVC here. It forms at the level of L5 as the common iliac veins unite together. If we flip over to the left-hand side, we have the aorta. Now, the aorta here is called the abdominal aorta, the double A. Okay, an aneurysm is a triple A, abdominal aortic aneurysm here. It enters at the level roughly and classically of T12 at the aortic hiatus, which is formed of the right and left crust of the diaphragm, sort of like the left crust sort of tapers here, the right one runs down here a bit. So quite a significant portion of it is formed of the right crust. But it's not really, for the most part, it doesn't so much pass through the diaphragm as pass posterior to the diaphragm along the vertebral column. But it's classically called the aortic hiatus. Now, what I'll draw your attention to here is at T8, we have the caval opening. We have T10 to T11, but T10 is classical. The right and left crust forms this esophageal hiatus. And then T12 is the aorta. Now, what I'll draw your attention to here is straight away a few things. At its level, T12, it gives off these inferior phrenic arteries. Phrenos means the diaphragm, right? So the inferior phrenic arteries will run on the on this inferior aspect of the hemidiaphragm bilaterally. Then at T12 as well, it's giving off this celiac trunk, which is also called the celiac axis, because it has three different branches, which we will get to. They're the proper hepatic, the left gastric, and the splenic. And then at L1, it gives off the superior mesenteric, which arches over the left renal vein, which is draining the hilar of the kidney into the IVC here. It's also draining a suprarenal vein here for the adrenal gland on this side, and it's draining a gonadal vein. Now note how this is different to this arrangement here. So the right suprarenal gland or adrenal gland drains directly into the IVC here. The gonadal vein here will drain directly into the IVC on this side. So there is not a bilateral symmetry to this. Now, this caval aortic blood supply is very variable, but this is the typical presentation. So we've got superior mesenteric, and then down here at L3, we've got the inferior mesenteric. So there's a bit of a gap between superior and inferior mesenteric, which is midgut and hindgut blood supply. And that's where these little bad boys here come into play, which are the gonadals, the right and left gonadal arteries. What I'll also draw your attention to here is the bifurcation of the abdominal aorta into the common iliacs, the right and left common iliacs, descending into the pelvic basin, which will then bifurcate into the internal and external iliacs, and then the external will go on to be the femoral artery, and this median sacral artery, which comes off roughly at the bifurcation of the aorta to run down here, but we will get to that. Okay, so that's roughly everything you kind of need to know. Note nutcracker syndrome. So if this superior mesenteric artery is pushed posteriorly, it can compress this renal vein and prevent drainage of the suprarenal gland, left kidney, and the gonads on the left-hand side. What else should you notice? That the IVC, the left renal vein, is longer than the right because it's on the right-hand side. And it's the converse being the aorta. So the left renal artery is smaller than the right renal artery. And just note the course that the right renal artery has to take posterior to the veins. Okay? Note transversus abdominis, quadratus lumborum, forming these beds of the kidneys here, and there's a rectus spinae muscles here as well. We've got iliacus down here, we've got psoas major, psoas minor, uniting with iliacus to form iliopsoas to insert on that lesser trochanter, but again, we'll come to that later. So that is basically everything I can draw, I think, from this. Let's move on to the foregut blood supply here. A lovely diagram here. We can see the celiac axis giving off this common hepatic artery, and this common hepatic artery gives us a few different branches. In this case, it's giving off our right gastric, and that'll anastomose here with the left gastric artery, which is the second branch off this celiac trunk. So we've had our common hepatic, and we've had our left gastric. And then we have this branch here. That's what it used to be called, the lineal artery. It's now called the splenic artery. This is the one that tortuously runs on the superior aspect of the body and then tail of the pancreas to the splenic hilum here, giving off little branches to the fundus and the body of the stomach. See the stomach video on this one. And those are called the short gastric arteries. So here we have the common hepatic giving off the right gastric, then it gives off gastroduodenal. Okay, we'll see what that does. That bifurcates into the gastroepiploic and the superior pancreaticoduodenal arteries, and there's anterior-posterior branches of that, but we will get to that when we reflect the stomach back, which I believe is on the next slide. It is. Don't worry about that for now. So gastroduodenal. Once the gastric and the gastroduodenals have been popped off here, this artery here that runs in the hepatoduodenal ligament as the portal triad with the hepatic portal vein and with the common hepatic, common bile duct is termed the proper hepatic artery. Okay, so we have the common hepatic artery and then we have the proper hepatic artery. Just before it enters the substance of the liver, it will bifurcate into the right and left hepatic arteries. You can see the right hepatic artery there passing under this common hepatic duct here. And normally, again, tremendous variability, but normally the right hepatic artery will give off a cystic artery here, which supplies the gallbladder. Okay? Whew, take a breath. So this is the common hepatic duct, which joins the cystic duct of the gallbladder to form the common bile duct. Okay? So we have the right and left hepatic ducts, common hepatic, joined to cystic to form the common bile duct. So this is the same thing, but the stomach's been reflected up. We can see this very skinny looking pancreas here. We have the left gastric running in a lesser curvature and anastomosing with the right gastric. We have the common hepatic here. We have the now termed splenic. Note it's very wiggly course. The splenic gives off a left gastroepiploic or gastromental artery. And this will anastomose with the right gastromental artery off the gastroduodenal. So here we see, running posterior to the first part of the duodenum, the gastroduodenal artery, which bifurcates into the right gastroepiploic, and this branch here, which is termed the superior pancreaticoduodenal. Now here's an important point to add here, that the superior pancreaticoduodenal anastomoses with the inferior pancreaticoduodenal, which is one of the first branches off the superior mesenteric artery. So here we have the connection between the superior and inferior pancreaticoduodenal arteries about the head of the pancreas in the C shape of the duodenum. Now we come to the SMA, the midgut structure, which is, remember, end of the second portion of the duodenum to 2/3 of the way along the transverse colon. All of that gut tube of endoderm is what we call midgut. So look at the SMA there. It has a characteristic arc from the aorta at L1, posterior to the pancreas, running towards this right iliac region, the iliac fossa here. Okay, so it's quite good to see on arteriographs because you can see it moving that way, because the IMA will come lower down and will go to the left. So you've got a right shunt versus a left shunt. Okay, so the very first branch that it gives off here, if you remember, would be that inferior pancreaticoduodenal, which comes off here and then snakes around here and forms that. We then have this big fat branch here, which is our middle colic, and this goes up here, blah, blah, blah. We have a right colic here, and then trace the SMA down, it forms this lovely loop here, and this final portion is termed the ileocolic. Now you can imagine how variable this is, but stay with me here, okay? So you've got our middle colic, our right colic, our inferior pancreaticoduodenal, and our ileocolic. Now this ileocolic gives off something called the appendicular artery to the appendix here. There's a vermiform appendix. I think there's a picture of it later, maybe, I'm not sure. But there you go. Now all the way along here, along the cecum, the ascending, transverse, and descending colon, right the way down, is one big artery termed the marginal artery. It does have an eponymous name, but I wouldn't worry about that. So, well, it's the marginal artery of Drummond, if you want to know. So you've got this artery that goes up, along, and down. And it is a union of anastomosis between this ileocolic, appendicular, right colic, middle colic, and then off of the IMA, you'll have left colic, and you'll have sigmoidal and superior rectal arteries. And they all provide branches to this marginal artery of Drummond that runs along here. So this is portions of the marginal artery of Drummond. Okay? Then you've got these little branches off of this side, which are just variably called jejunal and ileal arteries or branches off of the SMA. And obviously the superior mesenteric artery is commonly abbreviated to SMA. It's how you'll always see it named because it's a very long name. It's called mesenteric because all of these branches run within a double-folded mesentery. Now let's have a look after I've had a sip at the IMA. So we've got abdominal aorta, level of bifurcation is L4, and if you look posterior and to the right, you can see the IVC forming just slightly below that at L5. Here comes the IMA, right? It gives off a left colic, and then this will zip back around, forming bits of the marginal. And this is a very famous arc, and I've forgotten the eponymous name, but it's a very famous one. It's not in our syllabus anyway. It anastomoses the left colic anastomoses with the middle colic here. So this is a very important collateral circulation supply between midgut of the SMA and hindgut of the IMA. So left colic, blah, blah. We then have a sigmoidal set of arteries, and then we have a superior rectal. And this is what this is here. So it's called the super.hemorrhoidal. They used to call the rectal arteries, of which there are 3, the hemorrhoidal arteries. So in the 1918, when this was colorized from Henry Carter's original 19th century drawings, they were called the hemorrhoidals. They're now called the rectals, so bear with me on that. But that's the supply. So just as a quick recap here, right, we've got the middle colic, the right colic, and the ileocolic with the appendicular for the SMA. And then for the IMA here, we've got the left colic giving, as part of the marginal branch, this well-known arc connecting the left and middle colic, providing an important midgut and hindgut anastomosis, which is good collateral circulation. We have sigmoidal and we have superior rectal. Okay? There you go.